Now we're all here. Welcome. I'm JJ, and as I leave the shade of this yew tree, you're joining me at a church called Old Crofton Church, and that is in the south of England, UK. And I've brought you down here today to talk about a ley line that runs through it, and the ley line is called Belinus, and it's part of the spine of Albion. It's the male current, and this particular church was dedicated to a king, King Edmund, and he was born in 841 on Christmas Day, and he became king in 855, and then on the 20th of November 869 he come to an abrupt end when the Danes come across and filled him up full of arrows, and just for good measure they whipped his bonds off because he wouldn't surrender his beliefs. And I think it's very fitting that he become a martyr and they dedicated this church to him. It's quite fitting. And what else is interesting is it was mentioned in a very famous book. In 1066 we was conquered by a chap by the name of William the Conqueror, and he became king, obviously William the First. He was also known as William that word which means illegitimate that I can't say. Algorithms, don't you love them? So he sort of like decided what lands I should say rather belonged to who. And what he did was he had a survey done, and that survey was called the Domesday Book, and this church was mentioned in that very book of it's 1085. And so fascinating history. So we're literally stood next to a church that's 1200 years old, and this is obviously the west side of the church, and there's lots of graves, and interestingly I brought down with me this, and this is a smoky quartz crystal, and it's been shaped into a dragon's head, and I thought that was quite fitting for the serpent energy, the male current, although this one I call Cassandra with a K, and sometimes I think she speaks to me, you know, making great proclamations, but I never take any notice of her. So what I thought I'd do is just come around the back of the church and show you some really interesting things. And amongst the gravestones, what I come to notice is they're not all graves. In fact, this one down here is a sarsen stone. I'll put Cassandra on there like that. So as sarsen stones go, this one is very, very interesting. It's probably been here for time immemorial. Who knows why? But what I also want to bring your attention to is, as I turn around to the west corner of the church, you will see that this 1200-year-old church is actually built on a sarsen stone. The cornerstone of this church is sarsen, and you know what the Freemasons are like when they used, back in the day, when they used to build a building, the cornerstone was like the focal point. It was the ceremonial point they started the building on. So I think this was a very important place. They decided to build this church some 1200 years ago. But what I'm a bit more suspicious about is what they built it upon, because there's two sarsen stones there. I mean, even the wall's a couple of hundred years old, isn't it, next door? So that's the thing with England, there's just history everywhere, you can't help but trip over it. But in amongst the back of the church, I'll swing around, you'll notice just scattered in the yard there's sarsen stones everywhere. There's another one over in that corner, and there's another one just like in the corner over there covered in moss. And as I come closer to it, you'll get to see it's not a small thing, but maybe that's resonating there at some frequency and doing something that I don't understand. But more interestingly, the actual north wall of this church is built on or within these three sarsen stones here. Now the ley line was measured to come out this corner of the church, and I suspect these three stones were placed here to mark the old ley line, and because they knew how to use them energies back in the day. But when you touch these stones, you can actually feel this, although they're damp and sort of like cold, if you're attuned to this sort of thing, it's almost like you're connecting with something. And when you think of all the weddings and the funerals, and you know, even the christenings that go on in this place, that joy that is surrounded in them events sort of like might resonate into the stones and maybe into the ley lines and be carried off to who knows where and why. But I think it's probably the reason we do have our shared reality sort of like resonate in the way it does. Because when I think about these three stones here, along with the other two which are left over there. I suspect this was probably a stone circle back from Neolithic times, and they chose to reuse the site for the church because of its energy. So it's interesting, and I hope you find it interesting. And but another sort of like aside, I noticed even what we might know as modern history, the windows, the stained windows, there's lots of information within them, and there's one up here which is a circle. If I got it in shot, I've got it in shot. There we go. And now in the middle of that, someone's obviously commissioned that, and within it you've got 2 arrows within the crown, and that's obviously to signify the taking of the crown from King Edmund by the Danes back in the day, with sort of like the arrows and the crown, got rid of it. And I find that just absolutely fascinating, and I wonder how many other people notice things like this as we walk around these places. But yeah, and the other thing I thought I'd just mention all over England is we have these yew trees in churchyards, and they were sort of like nicknamed the Hampshire weed. And the reason they were nicknamed the Hampshire weed is because they always grew in the yards, and there's lots of folklores as to know why. And one of them is the yew tree lays dormant for long periods of time and can just suddenly sprout again, nobody knows why. But I think the one I like, the reason we find them is because the actual needles from the yew tree are poisonous to cattle and sheep and goats, but they used the yew tree to make the longbow, because part of the trunk is good for compression and the other part of it is good for expansion. So that's why it was used for the big longbows, which were really about 6 foot tall, and they were really powerful. But knowing that it was poisonous to cattle, they couldn't grow them anywhere, so the only walled-in places back then were places like churchyards. So I think that's why we have so many yew trees still in our churchyards today. So I don't know whether that folklore's true, but I like it, so I'm sticking with it. So what I wanted to show you also is I'm going to come back here in a few months' time. I'm hoping to get in contact with the man who runs the place and be able to show you inside. But I thought today, if I just sort of like bring you down here, show you what I found. If you find it interesting, it's a wonderful place to come and visit if you happen to be in the south of England. So this is Old Crofton Church, dedicated to St Edmund. So if you like these videos, you know what to do, and I'll see you in the next one.